don't have to be a fundraiser. You're a hero if you put your hand out and say, I want some support. And we are in receipt of maybe 100 calls to that service every single week. Lost a member of staff, and I was like, where do I go? Where do I go to manage my grief and the grief of my staff? And there are no services. Have you ever thought about ending your life? Does it ever feel like it gets that bad? Clients that had come to us and said, I would not be alive if it wasn't for Kelly's Heroes. They put it down as clear as that. They saved my life.
This episode of All Things Business, the podcast, is brought to you by our digital media partner, DFA Law. DFA Law, providers of expert and dedicated legal advice to businesses and families since 1838. DFA Law, the law firm for life.
Sherry.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
You nervous?
Yes.
Why?
I don't know.
You'll be fine. This is just a chat. So, Mental Health Awareness Week.
Yes.
Big week in the year.
Mm-hmm.
But who else? I couldn't think of anybody else better, because Kelly's Heroes, for those that listen regularly, know that I'm a very proud trustee of this wonderful charity, and you're the CEO. So just introduce yourself and what you do for the charity to everyone.
Okay, so Sherry Adams, as you know, been with the charity since end of 2020, just we were coming out of the pandemic, and then officially started in a kind of like the CEO role in January 21. So I'm in my 4th year, so not long after the charity was founded. But it was kind of meeting John and Rachel and Amy, and then putting together these support services so we can actually get out there and help people. And
for people listening or watching that perhaps haven't heard of Kelly's Heroes, just summarise Kelly's Heroes for us.
So Kelly's Heroes founded after Kelly died. So Kelly was just 24, short period of anxiety and depression, and she ended her own life in December 2018. And family, John, Rachel and Amy and friends wanted a legacy for Kelly. They wanted a charity, and they set it up. And initially, in those early days, they called it We Mind and Kelly Matters. And John's fundraising team were called Kelly's Heroes. Yeah. And I guess nobody knew what it would look like in 3 or 4 years' time. And last year, we kind of sat back and reflected on how far the charity had come, how much money has been raised just in 3 years, and decided to just trade as Kelly's Heroes. We recognised and we reflected a lot on the feedback from what clients had given us, clients that had come to the services, people that had done the fundraising, and they thought, they're all heroes. They're all you don't have to be a fundraiser. You're a hero if you put your hand out and say, I want some support.
And there's been lots of different fundraising activities. Mm-hmm. What's the one that stands out for you where you go, bloody hell, haven't they done well?
I mean, it has to be the American leg of 2022, wasn't it? Oh my God, 2022. It has to be the American leg, simply because I was part of the support crew. And once I got over the size of the RVs, which I was supposed to drive, but I didn't. I ended up just being support crew. Some of the days on there, just the amount of work these guys put in on the bikes. And
how far do they travel on that American leg?
So the American leg was 17 days on the bikes. Flew over to New York and cycled from New York to San Francisco. I think they had 2 days off in between, but it was consistent. I mean, it was my role to kind of check everybody into the hotels at the end of the day, get their bags off the buses, and they were literally pulling up at the hotels at 7 o'clock at night, laundry bags outside the room, getting the kit washed overnight, getting them fed, 6 o'clock the next morning, making sure everybody was back on the bus at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was relentless. Yeah. And the highlights look fantastic because you see
but you don't get to see all of the hard work. And I'd imagine there's a few torn muscles and a few tears shed as well.
I saw a lot of tears. A lot of tears, a lot of people heads down on the bike just grueling, and we would go past in the RV knowing that we were going to drive another 10 miles and then just sit, twiddling our thumbs waiting for them. Lunch was ready for them, and these guys would just get off their bikes absolutely exhausted, eat lunch, sometimes in silence, and then you think, they're in that headspace. They're just going to get back
Driven
on their bikes
to-
and go again. It was incredible what they did.
Yeah, and I think what those heroes have done is raised tens of thousands, well, hundreds of thousands of pounds actually, since the charity's been formed.
Yeah.
And that's gone a huge way in helping and saving many people. One of the things that I find incredibly proud when I sit on those trustee meetings and you deliver like the updates, I'd sit back and go, wow, like I genuinely find it overwhelming, really. And then I go home and I sort of reflect on it, and you think that this charity is very, very special. Can you share with us an example of sort of year-on-year growth in terms of the number of people that the charity's helping?
So in the first year, initially day one, it was just me. I had about a decade of working in the charity sector across a couple of different other charities, mental health predominantly. And, for the first 6 months, it was me. And then I recruited 2 counsellors because I couldn't manage seeing the clients and trying to, get a startup charity off the ground. By about the end of the first year, we had 10 counsellors on the team. And since day one, we've not only have we done the counselling service, but we've also done this live chat service. Yeah. So you click on a pink button on the website and you can talk to, a member of the team. You can talk to a member of the team about, even if you're just having a crap day, talk to somebody. And we did that right from day one. And, I worked really hard getting it set up and then recruiting the right people to come on board. By year 2, we were in double figures, staff, bank staff, counsellors, live chat team. Yeah. Now, don't test me now, we're probably around the 35, 36 people behind the scenes, seeing people. And the live chat has now gone 7 days a week, extended hours on Saturdays and Sundays. And we are in receipt of maybe 100 calls to that service every single week.
Wow. And from those calls, obviously people are, I suppose, needing different types of support. Yeah. But it's about the signposting and identifying where they are. Yeah. And then providing the right support thereafter. Yeah.
So the team are trained listeners. They're not all counsellors on the live chat team. They're not providing a counselling service. They're providing a listening service. So it's open to anybody who wants to remain anonymous, remain that high level of confidentiality, and come on, just say, I'm really struggling. I've never told anybody before. Yeah. I don't know who to tell. I don't know if I want to tell anyone. So sometimes it's that early involvement and hand-holding to having the perhaps, why don't you come on and talk to us again tomorrow night? And then, by the end of the week, they've got the confidence to either go and do a GP visit or actually considering doing a self-referral and talking to a trained counsellor to try and work out what, the underlying problems are.
And it's completely free for people that need us, need the charity. I've said this before the pandemic, that mental health is the real pandemic that we face. And from everything I hear and see and read, it's not getting any easier. Would you agree with that, or do you?
I certainly don't think it's getting easier, because I see the number of people that are referring into us, and I see those numbers increasing week on week. So I don't think it is getting any easier. I think what has happened is people are talking about it a lot more. Sadly, that's not being matched up with funding to support people anymore. I think it can go the other way in terms of everybody almost, how do I put this best, kind of dramatises mental health. I think we kind of need to normalise mental health and say every one of us can have a bad day. Yeah. That doesn't mean to say you've got poor mental health. So let's not go from 0 to 100, but just accept that we can have good days, we can have bad days. But when they become persistent, when you're looking at 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and nothing feels any different, that's when I think we can start to look at supporting someone with poor mental health. But let's move away from this notion that, everybody has a diagnosis, and just go back to, we all need to be responsible for looking after our well-being. So if you've had a bad day, what are you going to do different tomorrow?
So if someone's listening to this and they think, actually, I might be having poor mental health, but hadn't really appreciated that before. What tips or advice would you give them? But if there was 3 things that you should say that they should consider as part of their daily routine, or just to think about over the next week?
3.
Well,
Can I get it
don't
down
have
to
to
3?
be 3.
Okay.
Get it down to 3. Oh, more the merrier.
Yeah, more the merrier. 1, I think, is about connection. I think one of the biggest things, not derogatory, but negative things that came out of the pandemic was this belief that we had to distance ourselves. And the message was socially distance.
Cheers, Bojo.
We didn't need to socially distance. We needed to physically distance from other people to stop the spread of the virus, but not socially. So I think a lot of people did kind of go inwards. They did go into their bedrooms. They stayed in their homes. So I think if you notice that your well-being is suffering, you think you're having poor mental health, connect, talk to someone,
or a loved one, or a colleague, or a
it
friend.
doesn't have to be a professional. It can just making an effort, perhaps go for a walk around the block, perhaps take the dog for a walk if you've got a dog, but if someone walks past you, try and make eye contact and just say morning. It can be something as simple
Make
as that,
someone's day.
Instead of head down and being locked into your own world. So 1, I would say connect and talk to other people. 2, I personally don't believe that all doctors can fix all mental health problems. I think there has to be an action on your part. So if you recognise that you're struggling, you're feeling a bit different, then what are you going to do different tomorrow? Are you going to think, well, actually, I'm going to have a look at my dinner. Am I eating healthily? Am I going to cut out the processed foods for tomorrow? I'm going to cut back on the sugar a little bit. Think about, how am I feeding my body? And sleep. Not too much sleep, not too little sleep. And I think it's those 3, if we want 3 things: sleep, diet, and connection.
You mentioned there about GPs. I think anybody that's tried to get in with the doctors recently, it's really challenging, and that's not a pop at GP surgeries at all. No. It's just supply and demand, I suppose. And the NHS, unfortunately, is a broken organisation, and it's probably in the worst state it's been in.
It feels that way.
Certainly in my lifetime. And again, that's not being derogatory to any NHS staff, because I think they're wonderful human beings. I certainly couldn't do that job. My father-in-law was in A&E for 22 and a half hours 2 weeks ago. I couldn't believe it. And I left the gym and went into Kettering to, first of all, see if he was all right, and he was in tears. And then secondly, I wanted to speak to somebody. And the most senior person in A&E, I thought she was going to cry. And I was like, wow, this is in a, and he was on a drip, but he was in a wheelchair, and he'd been in the same place for 22 and a half hours. And there was nothing more they could do. It wasn't like, it's not that they don't care, they just can't do it. Yeah. So with that in mind, that there's a question there about funding. As a charity, we're pretty much self-sufficient in terms of our fundraising, isn't it? Is there funding available from whichever local government, NHS, whoever, that we can apply for, that can say, actually, guys, Kelly's Heroes, can you go and help these people, because we can't deal with it, we can't recruit them, you guys are set up for it. Does it work like that?
It's not as easy as that.
Why not?
Big question. I don't know why not. I don't know why it isn't more simple. I don't know where the money goes. I just know it doesn't come down to charities like ours. We had funding. As you know, we had some funding. We had an 18-month pilot project.
And that was from?
So this was from the NHS.
Yes, this was the
locally.
COVID relief fund?
Yeah, it was called COVID relief funding. So it was a kind of one-off pot of money that was available, and fortunately I'd been making enough noise at that time to say we need some money spent on suicide postvention services. So
this is supporting families of someone that they've lost to suicide.
Yeah. So I had another bereavement by suicide. Last one was about 5 years ago. And at that time, I went to the commissioner and I said, where do I go for support? You know, I was head of a mental health charity, lost a member of staff, and I was like, where do I go? Where do I go to manage my grief and the grief of my staff? and there are no services. So I'd been making a bit of noise for a few years. Then COVID happened, then I joined Kelly's Heroes, and things all came together at the right time, and we were awarded a sum of money to do an 18-month pilot project, providing bespoke services for people bereaved by suicide. And, it's one of those things, the people that we met, it was devastating to meet them because they only came to us for that one reason: they'd been bereaved.
Yeah.
But the people that we met, the hands that we held, the stories that we heard, it gives me goosebumps now. We met some of the loveliest people and heard some of the most, painful, harrowing stories. But the funding ended, and when it went to the commissioners and the NHFT at the end of the project, and we gave them a glowing report, we gave them all the feedback from the clients that had come to us and said, I would not be alive if it wasn't for Kelly's Heroes. They put it down as clear as that. They saved my life, which, when you receive feedback like that, just it chokes you up. And we delivered all this feedback, and they just said, sorry, there's no more money. So, what do we do now?
Who's that? Remind me of the organisation.
So this comes from the NHFT, so Northamptonshire Health Foundation Trust, which is the NHS in essence.
Okay, and how many people would the charity have worked with under that pot of money in that 18 months, roughly?
It was about 1,000.
1,000?
1,000 people. Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, that's people that either came to us for advice, this has happened, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do. People that came to one of our support groups. So we had 6 support groups set up around Northamptonshire. 2 of them, Kelly's Heroes, have managed to keep running. We did one-to-one counselling, we did family therapy, so we would go in and talk to siblings, the 7-year-old brother who didn't understand what happened to his big brother, for example. So worked with families, and, we even, under Kelly's Heroes, we even took 15 people away on a retreat for, 3 days to just give them a bit of respite from this grief. But it all ended.
Yeah, and I'd funding is so important, but there has to be pots of money available to help people out. We can't just not help them, because when you engage with a family or an individual, how long typically I know this will vary, I appreciate, but how long would they be under your care? Not care, but how long would you talk to them for?
I think if I look at all the families we've worked with in the last, say, 2 years, it averages around 6 months. There are some individuals that have remained with us since the first day they heard about us or the first day they referred to us. Some have gone on to become trained facilitators. So
really?
We actually have a couple of people who have been bereaved, and 18 months down the line, they've done some additional training. So they run a support group.
Wow.
And it gives them a focus.
Yeah.
And what
it's them sort of giving back, I suppose.
Giving back.
Yeah.
And then when the new person joins the group, of course, they know how they feel. And they kind of give a glimmer of hope that,
it's going to be okay.
It will be okay.
Yeah, it's such a tough one. Yeah.
I know, it gives you goosebumps, doesn't it?
Going forward then, I know, and again, this is nothing against Mind, because this actually shows how serious the pandemic around mental health is. But I read somewhere the other day, if you want to get an appointment with Mind in Northamptonshire, 6-month waiting list?
Possibly.
And nationally, I think, depending on some areas of the country, it could be even longer.
Could be even longer. I think it very much depends on the type of service that you're offering. So Mind Northamptonshire came about after a merger of 5 of the local Minds. So you've still got Kettering Mind, which is independent.
Yeah.
And then you've got Northamptonshire Mind, which is that merger of Wellingborough, Rushden, Toaster, Brackley, Northampton. Okay. That all came together. Yeah.
And because I'd really struggled with that. I mean, give me an idea of what waiting times are like. If somebody was to ring Kelly's Heroes today and say they didn't go on the chat facility, for example.
Even if they come through the chat facility, or they do a self-referral, or they go to their GP and their GP says, go to Kelly's Heroes. So it's 24 hours before they get an acknowledgement, and that's 7 days a week. So if the referral comes in on a Friday, they'll still get that email Saturday or Sunday to say, we acknowledge your referral. This is what's going to happen next. And they'll get an email to say a member of our team will offer you an appointment for an assessment, and every single person will have a 1-hour assessment. So, which is an opportunity to sit down, with another human being, sometimes on the telephone or Zoom, to say, tell me what's going on, what support you're looking for. And if it's decided, or after the assessment, we think that counselling is the right route, they're offered an appointment with the counsellor within 7 days. And we are still managing to do that. And we're in year 4.
Yeah, which is brilliant. And it's so, the number of people, the thousands of lives that the charity has had a positive impact on is fantastic.
I know.
But it's not getting any easier in terms of the numbers. So how important is the next 18 months for the charity? And with that, what support does the charity need?
Money. I'm going to just summarise you saying money. Obviously, we lost that funding, but we couldn't, as a board of trustees, yourself included and John, we couldn't just do what we were being told to do and say no to these people. And that's what we were told to do. Just say no. Tell them.
And that's the bit that's already.
I know. It's kind
of, whichever individual at that trust is, I can't contemplate that. You support somebody for 6 months, and just because the funding's been cut, they want you to say, actually, I'm really sorry, there's no more funding. You're on your own now.
You're on your own.
That isn't. No. I really struggle with that.
And the advice was, you have to explain the project's come to an end. There is no more funding. Go and see your GP. They go and see the GP, and the GP says, I've heard about this great charity called Kelly's Heroes. And even even this week, the referrals are still coming in from GPs. And
correct me if I'm wrong, but GPs aren't trained to provide mental health support, are they?
No.
Yeah, and that, again, that's nothing against GPs, but GPs I would imagine would probably welcome. But you think about how many missed long appointments, or sorry, not missed appointments, how many appointments a week are around mental health when actually they're going to the wrong place?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment.
And there's a whole education piece there.
Yeah.
And that leads me on then to education. And I know you've done loads of great stuff with schools across the county, and continue to do so. And I know it's one of John and Rachel and Amy's sort of goals is to help children and young adults. Just talk us through some of the training that you've done as well with teachers and non-teaching staff.
I do like the training. I get quite passionate about the training. I get a bit nervous as well sometimes. Matt Coleman, we absolutely love Matt Coleman. He's such an advocate for the charity, director at Nen Education Trust. And after the school community lost their young people to suicide, he was so passionate about, we need someone to talk to the teachers, etc. And 6 months planning meant that, I think it was September the 5th last year, I stood in an assembly looking at about 400 faces, and we had a whole day to deliver some training, and that was just incredible, because nobody had ever really stood before this cohort of not just teachers but every member of staff, from reception, from the kitchen staff, the catering staff, everybody, to talk to them about suicide, and how we can spot the warning signs, how we can look out for different risk factors, even the language, because a lot of people, they will stumble over their words. If you sit down and have a conversation about suicide, they're like,
Well, it's the one topic that nobody ever wants to have a serious conversation about.
No.
But for those that, unfortunately, and I know more people in recent years now than ever before about suicide, which is incredibly sad. But what Kelly's Heroes are doing.
But this is it. If we can raise awareness, if we can improve the education, improve the language, then we can start to break down some of that historical stigma around suicide. So when people are troubled by those thoughts, they actually feel it's okay to talk about them. Yeah. And hopefully there'll be someone in their circle, their wider circle, or someone who they cross paths with, that have had some training and feel confident enough to say, have you ever thought about ending your life? Does it ever feel like it gets that bad? And you're giving someone permission to talk about it. And that is a huge relief. And I say that from a personal experience. It's a huge relief to be able to say, I'm really, really struggling at the moment. So, yeah. I mean, the day that we did with an Education Trust was fantastic, and that has led on to more training. So we've done some more workshops with teachers, assessing suicide risk in children as young as 7. And, the teachers and staff come in and say, surely a child of 7 doesn't know. They do. They understand what suicide means. Even if they don't yet know what the word is, they understand that they can end their own lives.
Honestly, it's such a serious and emotional subject, and I think I've seen firsthand the amazing work that you and your team do. Just before we wrap this episode up, Sherry, if there was a message for those that have got within authorities and that have got the power in terms of funding, what message would that be from Kelly's Heroes perspective?
Kelly's Heroes is a unique charity. Move away from this myth that charities, are driven by high salaries and all the money goes on, corporate expenses. We don't have an office. We're all home-based. All the money that comes into Kelly's Heroes goes, directly towards supporting those clients, making sure that they get the service they need when they need it, timely, and saving lives.
And that's the most important thing.
That's the most important thing, because if we can save one life,
yep,
that ripple effect, that statistically 135 people that impacts, there was some research that said for every life lost by suicide, it costs, the country £1.4 million. We know that we've saved multiple lives. So a little bit of funding goes a long way with us.
Sherry, thank you.
You're welcome.
With all of our guests, we always like to ask them who would they have round for dinner. So if you've got a dinner party on Saturday night, which 4 people, anybody past or present, you can have, who would be the 4 people that would be around your dinner table?
What 4 people? I'd have to say Princess Diana, because I just grew up a bit of a fangirl with Lady Di. Morgan Freeman, because he could just leave me voice notes.
Yeah.
I would just absolutely love that. Sam Claflin, he's a young actor, youngish.
What's he been in?
He's in The Hunger Games.
Okay.
He was in Me Before You.
I can't picture him, but
Yeah, he's a young actor. He's got a really nice smile. And
is that a bit of a crush? Or
yeah, well, no, but
bit of eye candy for the dinner table.
Bit of eye candy for the dinner table. But he does talk good stuff about mental health. So he's kind of switched on.
Oh, yeah, good.
And number 4, I think I would have my nan.
Your nan.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Sherry, thank you ever so much, and
You're welcome.
keep doing an amazing job.
Awesome.